This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
Welcome back. Well, we're moving to the next phase of the Obama visit, and the attention now is on business. That big CEO meeting a little later in the afternoon. And the real attention is going to be how to further kickstart economic ties and business ties. And we have, of course, a range of experts here with us, taking us through this. Nisha Charya is with us, visiting fellow India-US Studies at Gateway's House. Siddharth Birla is with us. Harjiv Singh is with us. What is your take on what the major issues are likely to come up today? What would be your expectations by the end of the day?
I think one of the most important agenda items from at least the Indian government side is Make in India, because if we don't fix manufacturing, which is fairly low in terms of percentage of GDP, we'll have a hard time getting to the 9-10% growth rates that we need. So I think that is going to be a key focus, and if we can see some movement from the government side to make sure that we're able to attract some of that global manufacturing, which requires the supply chains to be fixed, our infrastructure needs to be fixed, and so he's addressing that through smart cities and the infrastructure side as well. So I would hope that would be one of the key agenda items in here. So.
And what have members of the American delegation been telling you? What would they like to hear?
I think they're very optimistic. Again, I think there's some gap in terms of the perception and the reality. I think, as somebody said earlier, the budget will, even though the finance minister is saying it's don't look at it that closely, I think those are key sort of markers within this calendar of India in terms of government announcements, so people will look at it very carefully. Also the fact that most of the stuff that's gone in right now is through the ordinance route. If we can get that passed from the legislative side, that's very important. So those are things they're going to be looking for.
Let's just come back to the atmospherics of it. Is there a sea change in attitudes though?
Oh, dramatically. I think if you go back to a year ago and compare it to that, the optimism is really back. And I think the animal spirits are close to being unleashed. I think we'll need to see a couple of deals getting signed, particularly on the Make in India side, because that's, you just came from Davos, and that's the big sort of splash in Davos was Make in India. And we need to see some traction on that, because I think as soon as we see that, we'll start to see, and if it's one or two big companies from the US that say, okay, we buy into this Make in India thing, that'll completely transform the way India is in the next couple of years, because as somebody said earlier, manufacturing is going to be the essence of how we grow as an economy.
Has China been something very much in the room? Whenever you've been also talking in previous years about India and American relations, has there been a concern on the American side about, we don't want to upset China, what does China figure in all of this? From the Indian side, how does China play a role in all this?
I think from the U.S. perspective, they want to have a closer relationship with India. It's pretty clear. But I think to Rajamohan's point, I think from the Indian side, we've been more cautious over the last decade on this. And I think this is definitely a move
India's been more cautious than China, you'd say.
We've been more cautious about getting closer to the U.S., about keeping China in sort of good humor about this. And I think that is now hopefully going to change, and we will, at the end of the day, it should be about real politics, about our needs and our sort of interests, and I think that's something this Prime Minister clearly is signaling, and I hope that happens. So.
All right, Harjiv, great to get your views. I know you have to leave us very shortly, so thank you so much for having joined us.